Okay, so first of all, I'll introduce myself. Donal from Médecins Sans Frontières. I work in the Dublin office, but sometimes I get sent around the world to various places where we work. We're in over 65 countries around the world, and we mainly do emergency medical care and provide medical care in places of conflict, war, epidemics or natural disasters. And only this morning, in fact, there was an earthquake over in Indonesia, Jakarta even, and we're scaling up to see if we need to do anything about that. I think it's a 6.5 magnitude earthquake. But one of the many crises in which we're working in at the moment, and there are many around the world, is down on the central Mediterranean route. So that's the stretch between Libya and Italy in the Mediterranean Sea. Last year, I think I was here speaking about the Syrian refugee crisis. I don't think anybody in the room was at that talk, no? That's basically the route that has now been shut down because of the EU-Turkey deal, which used to go from Syria into Europe via Greece and Turkey. After the EU-Turkey deal, that route has now been shut, and there's about 50,000 refugees, primarily Syrian, but also Afghani and Pakistani, and from various other spots, now trapped in Greece or trapped in Turkey without being able to free movement. So there's about over 50,000 people trapped there. This is different. This is over in the central Mediterranean, the stretch of water between Libya and Italy. A little bit of a background. So after the fall of Gaddafi, who was the leader of Libya in 2011, basically part of Gaddafi's deal with the European Union was to kind of seal the borders and to stop people from travelling up to Europe from the continent of Africa. So after Gaddafi had fell, those routes were now open again, and people were able to get access to the sea. The militias who overthrew Gaddafi, now with nothing else to do, still had arms and still had good networks, so they've created a kind of smuggling enterprise, and they're trading really in people's misery. In fact, a lot of people are moving to Libya from all over African continent, primarily sub-Saharan Africa, so people are coming from West Africa, places like Gambia, Cameroon, even Nigeria, even northern Borno State, places like that, but also even as far south as South Sudan, and on the east coast we have people coming from Somalia, Eritrea, and places like that, and Sudan as well. So people are moving for all sorts of reasons. Some are fleeing war, some are fleeing persecution, some are fleeing extreme poverty, and some just want a better life. And all of these people are moving from sub-Saharan Africa up to Libya. Many are thinking of staying in Libya, but when they get to Libya, they realize that it's not a place, not a safe place for them. It's not a good place for them to stay, and so they attempt the journey over to Europe. So that's a little bit about the background. I spent a month this year in July down on this boat, which is the Aquarius, the MV Aquarius, which is an old research vessel that Médecins Sans Frontières is running in partnership with another organisation, SOS Mediterranean. We also had two other boats down there that were run entirely by Médecins Sans Frontières. Two of the boats have just stopped their service, and this boat, the one that I was on, the Aquarius, is still running. It's going to run all winter long. It's not going to stop, and it's pretty much one of the only NGO vessels down there at the moment. The Irish Navy are down there too, the Italian Navy, and some other European Navy services are down there. We're down there in a purely humanitarian mission. The naval services, some of them are there. The Irish are pretty much humanitarian as well. Some others are there for surveillance, military operations, and naval operations. We're just down there for humanitarian work. Our prime purpose is to save lives, take people from very unseaworthy craft, take people from the sea, take them on board, fill up the boat, and go back to Italy, go back to Sicily. This year has been the deadliest year in a long time down in the central Mediterranean. I think over 3,500 people have died. That's just this year alone. So it's a highly dangerous route. It's in fact the most dangerous route for people travelling to Europe. And death at sea continues. Only 2 days ago, our teams recovered 4 dead bodies from the sea. So it's a highly dangerous route. The boat itself, you can see it. It's pretty big. It's about 40 years old. It's run by a crew, the MSF medical team on board, and then another rescue crew as well. So it's a pretty busy boat. And then when you have people on board, it gets extremely packed. We like to call people, not refugees or migrants, because at the end of the day, no matter what label are on the people who are moving, they're still people, they're human beings. So we don't like to label the people who we're meeting as either refugees or migrants. They're people are people. So that's the boat. A typical rescue, so how it works is, a lot of the people are actually in detention in Libya before they head out to sea. So over 52% of those who we've spoken to on board our 3 ships, since we've been running this operation since May 2015, over 52% of them have been detained in Libya. So that's detained by armed groups, by the state forces. There's 3 groups who think that they're the government at the moment in Libya, and they all have a claim on the fact that they're the government. They all have arms, and they all have connections to the smuggling business. So 52% of the people we met have been detained, and this is arbitrary detention. They could be picked up on the street, they could be stopped at checkpoints, arrested, or even a lot of people are kind of used as I suppose it's a form of modern day slavery, in that they're working on construction sites for little to no money. They're paying off debts to get on a boat to get to Europe. The smugglers are charging about $500 for people from West Africa, and maybe even up to $1,000 for people from East Africa. The reason for that being is in East Africa there tends to be a lot of very close family connections. So if you, I suppose, almost kidnap a person in Libya from Eritrea, and you make them contact their family, their friends, and any network they have in Eritrea will do everything they can to get money up to the smugglers. The smugglers know this, and they exploit this because they know they could probably get about $1,000 from somebody if they're from East Africa for cultural reasons. So it's a highly profitable business for the smugglers. When people, anyway, regardless of that, by the way, while people are in detention, 82% of those people we've spoken to have either witnessed or been subject to violence. So this can be beating, this can be raping in some examples, and mistreatment of all forms. So that's a huge, staggering figure of people who've been witness to or subject to violence while in captivity in Libya. So anyway, when people get onto the boats, and they're either a rubber dinghy like this one on the left, or else they're a wooden boat. They get sent out to sea. About 150, 160 people packed into a boat that should only really accommodate maybe 20 to 30 people at most. So it's really scary stuff. If you can imagine being out there at sea at night in the pitch dark, with no idea as to what will happen next. So I mean, a lot of these people are told, get in a dinghy, you'll be in Italy in the morning. Little do they know, it's about a 3-day voyage in a ship like ours to get to Italy. So they're fed lies and sent out to sea. When we get them, which is about 14, 15 hours later, it's usually in the morning time, but it can be later in the afternoon. They've been sitting cramped into these very unseaworthy boats for a very long time, and people are scared, to be honest. So what we do is we approach the boat. Our two rescue ribs approach the boat. They circle the dinghy or the wooden boat. They calm everybody down. They tell everybody they're going to be rescued, and they distribute life jackets. That's the most important thing at the beginning, because if there's panic and people don't have life jackets, then people are in the water. You do not want people in the water, because there's a high chance of people drowning and dying. So the first thing is to get life jackets to everybody, calm them down, and then it's a matter of taking women and children first, or any vulnerable or medical cases, off to the hospital on board our ship, and then it's back to take everybody else. Usually the women and children are in the middle of these rubber dinghies to protect them. However, that doesn't always work out, as I'll talk about later. So the operation takes about maybe an hour and a half to get everybody. Once everybody's safely on board, then we go about taking data, details Where are you coming from? What age are you? Are you male, female? What are you leaving? What are you hoping for? We take some details. We give people some time and space when they get on board, and then we start to talk to them, because it's important for us to find out who these people are, where they're coming from, to gather as much data as possible, so that we can tweak our response and make sure we're providing the best level of service possible. And then it's a matter of people who need medical treatment being seen to. Talking about the medical side of point of view, a lot of people when they get on board are disorientated from the fuel that spills into these dinghies. So if you can imagine, when the smugglers send people out, they give them about 10 litres of petrol, and they say, go that way, here's a compass, you'll be in Europe in the morning. What often happens is the fuel is kicked over in the boat and it mixes with seawater, and it causes, the fumes can knock people out, make people very dizzy, and give really serious burns. If you're sitting in a pool of fuel for hours, it's genuinely really dangerous stuff. So mixed with seawater, it's really bad for the skin and for the respiratory system. So people are covered in fuel, they're completely dazed and confused when they get on board. So they're given the opportunity to have showers, get some dry, fresh clothes on, because everybody's soaking wet. The medical cases are seen to. We've had babies born on board. We've had 5-day-old twins rescued from these boats. So if you can imagine 5-day-old twins, they're like that big. Pregnant women come on board too, so yeah, lots of births on board as well. What the doctors see on board, what the medics treat, are injuries connected to, can be injuries connected to mistreatment in Libya. So, men with big slash marks on their back from whips, and other, maybe on the soles of people's feet, you can see where people have been beaten. So signs of torture and mistreatment. In some cases, not as serious as that. People just have, people haven't seen a doctor in a very long time. People haven't seen a medic in a very long time. So it's, basic everyday health needs as well that our doctors are seeing on board as well as the kind of horrific, scary stuff for people. So that's it. The medics get to see everybody. We distribute food, warm clothes. People can calm down, and then we can start to hear their stories. This is one of our doctors on board, Dr. Erna, speaking to one of the gentlemen who we've taken on board the ship. She was the doctor on board. She'll have a nurse. She'll also have a midwife, and then we'll have a project coordinator. We'll have a logistician, and various other members of the team. So Erna does her rounds and makes sure that everybody's been seen to medically and looked after. You can see this kind of white suit this guy is wearing here. This is just like a dry onesie, so that people can change into from their drenched, soaking clothes. So Erna was on board the ship for about 3 months. Before this mission, she was over in West Africa with Ebola, responding to Ebola 2 years ago, and then in places like Jordan and all around the world. Here's some people lining up to register with one of our nurses, Mark. He takes their details, names, ages, where they're coming from, and data like that's very helpful for us. Often what happens is after one rescue, there's often another call, and we'll have to respond to another rescue. So you can have some days where you're spending pretty much from dawn to dusk, traveling around a patch of the Mediterranean, and taking new people on board. Every rescue is different. No rescue is the same. On one rescue, you might have all males. On another rescue, you might have 80% female. One rescue you might have predominantly people from Eritrea, which is the east of Africa. Another rescue, you could have people predominantly from Gambia in the west of Africa. So each rescue is very different. Some of them are extremely challenging, and some of them go to plan. So disembarkation in Italy. People are checked by the Italian authorities. So that's the border force, the Italian police, the health ministry, the Red Cross, and various other agencies. It usually takes hours and hours to disembark people when we get to Sicily, because everybody feels the need to tick their boxes and speak to the people who get on board. Some of the police and the Frontex services are looking for any information or intelligence that can disrupt the smuggling network. That's not our job, that's not our business. We don't get involved with that. We're purely humanitarians. We're not here to disrupt the smuggling network, nor to help police forces, nor to help the smugglers. So we're purely humanitarian. So what we tend not to speak to Frontex or the police. We tend to just allow people to disembark. But they might be looking for smugglers and things like that, or people connected to the smugglers. We're just there to save lives and to provide medical care to people who we rescue. So for a lot of people, when they finally get to Italy, it can be actually quite depressing, because first of all, when you see people on the rubber dinghies or the wooden boats and they get on board, they're obviously exhausted from their journey, and they'll sleep just for hours. It's the first time they've had a chance to sleep in a very long time. But when they wake up, they start to come back to life, and they get really excited, because they're heading for their new life in Europe. They've heard a lot about Europe. They're traveling for all sorts of reasons, but they know that they'll get to Europe relatively soon enough. So there's a great atmosphere and a great kind of buzz on the ship, as people are getting excited. What's terribly depressing is when you get closer and closer to Italy, and that their life isn't going to be all that great when they do get to Italy. And a lot of it will have to do with reception centres, inadequate reception centres, poor treatment from Europe, and for a lot of people, even falling outside of the reception centres and the official system, subject to all sorts of, maybe possible abuse by criminal networks, etc. So by the time you get to shore, it's not that exciting for the people, and a lot of them can kind of sense this, and they know the nearer we get to shore. Another picture of Erna and one of the gentlemen who were disembarking and transferring to the Italian Coast Guard here, which you can see in the background. So the way it works for us, we're obviously doing our own thing, but every now and then we have to work with, say, the Navy or the Italian Coast Guard in transferring people, because it's, for example, if we transfer people to the Navy, then we can go out and do another rescue, and they might transfer people to us, and we can fill up our ship and take people back. So that's how we kind of interact and interplay with the Navy and the Coast Guard services down there. These life jackets that you can see, we distribute these to people. Often the smugglers will give very basic life jackets that just don't work, that in fact aren't even life jackets, that look like life jackets, which is really troubling, because if people end up in the water thinking that they have a life jacket, they're not gonna stay buoyant, they're gonna go down. So it's highly unscrupulous of the smugglers to do that. Here's a bunch of guys from Gambia who were kind of happy to be on board, delighted not to be in the sea anymore, and just relaxing, getting ready for bedtime, to sleep outside. A lot of people have to sleep outside on the aft deck, but we do have a shelter room for women and children, and the more vulnerable cases, to protect women and children and to give them a kind of safe room whereby they can be seen to by the doctors, but also the midwife as well. That's where all the pregnant ladies go as well. This is another of our ship, the Dignity. I took this photograph from the Aquarius. This is just one of the three ships that we have down there. Sometimes we transferred people and took people from this vessel as well. This is the vessel that RTE got on last year, actually. There was a primetime programme that RTE put out last December, and this is the ship that they were on for the month. If anybody looks up the RTE player, they should be able to find it, primetime special, from down in the Mediterranean. Again, another view back at the Dignity. And again, so I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about the issues then surrounding the tragic rescues. So usually things go to plan, people are taken on board safely and cared for, but sometimes there are what we call tragic rescues involving deaths, sometimes many deaths. When I was on board one morning, we were called to the scene of a rescue by the MRCC, that's the Migrant Rescue Command Centre in Rome. They kind of have an overview of everything that's happening in the Mediterranean. and they kind of give us our orders in terms of there's a boat, say 25 kilometers off Tripoli. You need to get to it now. They give us our coordinates and we get there. So one morning we got our coordinates from the MRCC. There was a boat in distress northeast of Tripoli, 26 kilometers northeast of Tripoli, which was 3 hours away from where we were at that time. So we went at full steam ahead to this location. When we got there, there was the Italian Navy already evacuating people from 2 dinghies. Erna, who you can see in this picture, got on board one of our rescue dinghies just to assess the situation. The Italian Navy said there was dead people on board. When Erna got there, she realised that there were over 15 dead bodies on board one dinghy. So she went about, she has to check the pulse of everybody to make sure people are dead and not alive, and to find out any other medical cases. When she got back on board our ship, she said, yeah, there are many dead people on board. So we went about evacuating the alive people, took off 140 alive people, and then went about disembarking 22 dead bodies. It turned out this took hours. You can imagine the scene. There's a lot of very distraught, devastated people who sit with those bodies for over 3 hours under the hot, Mediterranean sun. So by the time we got there, we had to deal with the kind of, as well as a humanitarian situation, a logistical situation. How do you get 22 dead bodies on board the ship without, causing more trauma for the survivors? So that was a pretty intense day for everybody, for the survivors, and for the team too. So that was a complete tragedy. It turned out that there were 21 of the bodies were women. They were in the middle of the rubber dinghy, and this has happened a few times since. What happens is these rubber dinghies are manufactured in China. They're about 1 millimeter thick in terms of the rubber, so they're not seaworthy at all. But they're modified in that a plank of wood is laid out in the middle, so that people can sit on this plank of wood, but also to be able to squeeze people around the side of the plank of wood. And it's really to maximise, on the smuggler's point of view, maximise the amount of people they can get on board and the amount of money they can get from people. So one of these boats, is worth a lot of money to them, these dinghies. So anyway, what happened is this time, and it's happened a few times since, is the wood in the centre of the boat had cracked, if you can imagine, like this, and people slipped down into the middle. Water and fuel had begun to gather in this almost like a paddling pool, if you can imagine that, in the middle of the boat. The fuel knocked people out. Because people were sitting above the people in the middle, they couldn't grab onto anything or get out of this pool that had formed. And it turned out that 21 women died in the crush. There was a panic, there was a crush, pandemonium on board, and it resulted in these 21 women being killed. If you looked at some of the survivors, on their ankles you can see bite marks, which kind of displayed that that everybody died tragic deaths. So this is happening in the Mediterranean all the time, and people don't know about it, and they don't. It's faded from the headlines. So, but this stuff is happening all the time. Only 2 days ago there was a similar incident, but there weren't as many people killed. So then you look at that situation and you say, I think we made, on board at the time we had Le Monde, who were a newspaper from France, so they covered the story. There was PBS, who were a big American news organization, so they covered the story as well. So in terms of my perspective, at least the information got out there to a lot of people, and some people, people were able to know what was happening. But it wasn't the big headline news that I was expecting, and it kind of has to be now, tragically, it has to be about 200 to like maybe 300 people, maybe 150 people will have to die before it actually makes a splash internationally in the headlines, because people have become immune to this and people don't really care anymore. It's not news. We know people are dying and we don't care. So for me that's a big tragedy. People are immune and they're desensitized to this reality. So from our point of view as Médecins Sans Frontières, it's our duty not only to help people, but to communicate about it and to remind people that this is still happening, and to try and encourage European governments And it's not just a European problem, this is a worldwide phenomenon. There's 65 million people displaced worldwide at the moment. But it's to encourage European governments to provide safe, humane response to this crisis. It's not going away. You can't close your eyes and pretend it's not happening. And so far the European Union have been completely inadequate in their response to this. So yeah, and you're probably asking yourselves, well, what can I do? Well, I think what you can do is stay informed, read up on the issues, talk about it, think about it, and think about what we can do domestically as a country to respond to this. I know that Ireland has committed to taking in something like 4,500 people, which when you think compared to 65 million people displaced worldwide is not much, in all fairness. And then when people do get here, we have all sorts of domestic issues as well. I know that next week Francis Fitzgerald and the Justice Department are heading out to Greece, and they're going to meet some Syrian refugees, and they're hoping to take, I think, 200 Syrian children. That's what they say. I think only something like one unaccompanied minor has actually arrived so far. So I think Ireland's response has been utterly inadequate. And yeah, you might say, Peter McVerry was in here the other day, there's an out of control homeless crisis at the moment in Dublin, which is seriously important as well. But even with the homeless crisis, it's still important to think about what's happening internationally as well. So in terms of Europe's response, what we're doing in the Dublin office, if you even zoom out a little bit and you go down to Sicily today, right, there are hundreds of Eritreans and hundreds of Somalians, in reception centres that Ireland could, if they wanted to, take people in from tomorrow. But there's all sorts of issues. Like, for example, I was talking to somebody in the Justice Department, and they said there's security concerns for Eritreans, which is complete nonsense, because if you've ever met Eritrean people or you know anything about Eritrean people, they pose absolutely zero threat to the state. But for some reason, on some list somewhere, Eritreans pose a security risk to the country. So there's all sorts of non-joined up thinking going on in Ireland and in Europe, and a lot of it's to do with political will, because it's not as if we have like rabid anti-immigration platforms. We don't have right-wing parties. We don't have the BNP. We don't have Le Pen's group. We don't have the Brexiters. So it's not as if there's a very resistant population to migration. We also have migration in our blood and in our DNA, as everybody well knows. And it's not a million years ago. It's actually at the moment a lot of our friends and family are living all over the world. But for some reason, that form of immigration is fine and migration, but for some reason this sort isn't. So there's so many things that the Irish government could do. They can do it. The political will isn't there, which shouldn't be the case, because there is not a massive opposition to it. So what we have found is, and we're doctors, we're medics, we're not political, we're not a political organisation, but even the small bit of politics that we've been doing behind the scenes in Dublin, if you push a door that's halfway open, you've got far more of a chance than trying to push out a door that's completely shut. So there is will there, and it only takes, if you guys are active with the Social Justice Week and everything, just in terms of thinking, it's amazing how far a little bit of activism or a little bit of pushing will get you. If an issue excites you, or if it engages you, or if you believe that it's an issue as well, if you want to, you can actually change things without having to do too much. It's just a little bit of organising. So from our side of things, we're hoping to continue to communicate about what's happening in the Central Med, but also over with the Syrian refugees as well on the other route. And as we face into winter, the conditions on the Central Mediterranean are only going to get worse. The seas are going to get more choppy. There are going to be far more drownings because of the conditions. And then the living conditions that people are in Europe, in southern Europe, and in Greece are only going to get worse through the winter months. So part of our remit next week with the Minister for Justice is to give them a proper medical briefing as to the situation in Greece for the Syrian refugees as well. I might show you a little video, is that alright? Hopefully there's sound. Is there sound on this?
I'm not 100% sure the sound is working.
Okay.
Try it and see it wasn't working.
Okay, look, if it doesn't work, no worries, I'll just go
If it
through
doesn't
the
work, I can put it up on.
Sure. This may not work without sound, but we'll have a quick look, right? Can everybody see that? I suppose you can read it without the sound. So that's a typical overcrowded rubber dinghy while our teams are distributing life jackets to people. Okay, no subtitles there. But even people coming as far as Bangladesh, you know, so really people are coming from all sorts of places into Libya to try to get to Europe. Yeah. So just a short video to kind of give you a visual idea as to what it's like down there, but also to see from a little first-person stories from some of the people we've taken on board the ship. So that's Nicholas, one of our people from Dignity. So look, that's a night rescue. So you can only imagine at night how terrifying it is until the boat gets there with the big lamp. So yeah, so we say safe passage and we say right to asylum, which means, you know, safe and legal ways for people to reach protection in Europe. For us, it's, you know, it's a big priority. Go through quickly this listicle article that we have as well, and the top 10 things that we learned about the refugee crisis this year alone, just to give a little more detail. That's our brand new website, by the way. If anybody has time to look at msf.ie, we have a brand new website that looks pretty good. So 10 things you need to know about the Mediterranean crisis. So 2016 is already the deadliest year on record, and it's not even over yet. So 4,690 men, women and children have died while attempting the cross. 1,000 more than in all of 2015. So even though we're down there, even though the Navy are down there, people are still dying at massive, huge rates, and it's completely unacceptable in this day and age. Yet the boats are getting poorer, the quality of the boats are getting worse and worse. The wooden boats are particularly dangerous because a lot of people are packed into the hull at the bottom, and sometimes even locked down. So you can imagine trying to rescue people out of the hull of the boat is quite challenging, particularly if there are locks involved and people are panicking. So we all really fear having to go and rescue a wooden boat because there's been so many tragedies. That's a bit of a disturbing image. Hopefully I won't shock you, but I think it's, in the circumstances, it's tasteful enough. This is you can see one dead female here at the bottom of this rubber dinghy. I talked a little bit about the experience that we had when I was out in the ship, when 21 women were killed. There were 21 women floating in this manner as the lady in this picture, and you can see how much space is down there. So you know, the same thing has happened there. The boat's cracked, people have slipped down, and you can see one of the women floating in that mixture of fuel and water, which is highly dangerous. The smugglers are getting more ruthless than ever. So, for example, when I was out there, one of the smugglers' boat was following one of the boats with refugees and migrants on it. And when we rescued the boat, they went out to take back their motor, because their motor is worth about $5,000. So they can bring it back and they can use it again. So not only a lot of the people who get on board the dinghies and the wooden boats actually do so under gunfire. And this is a story we've heard a lot. When the militias want people to get quickly onto the rubber boats and the dinghies, they get the guns out, they get out their AK-47s and they fire at the people to give them a bit of urgency at getting onto the boat. And a lot of people have actually been shot in this process. We treated a guy who had a gunshot wound just above his knee from this situation before he got on the boat. So the smugglers are more ruthless than ever. Summary executions, horrific ill treatment, sexual abuse. Some cases amounted to torture. So it's getting worse in terms of the smugglers and their approach to refugees and migrants in Libya. Large numbers of unaccompanied kids are braving the sea alone. 16% of arrivals to Italy are children. 88% of them are unaccompanied. Huge amounts of unaccompanied minors. When I was on board, pretty much every rescue we had at least 15 unaccompanied minors. So these are children with no parents or guardians with them, facing an extremely uncertain future in Europe. Many women we rescue are pregnant. Many pregnancies as a result of rape. Yeah, absolutely. So when on board, they'll see our doctor on board. They'll talk about what's happened, and she'll hear these stories of women who've been raped, are now pregnant with a child. Their rapist's child is happening all the time. Babies, something positive. 4 babies were born on MSF rescue boats this year. One was born literally a day before I got on board the Aquarius. This child is one of a pair of twins. He's one of the 5-day-old twins who was taken on board the ship. You can see how tiny he is. Mother and babies are doing well. So that's the teams love when there's a baby on board, because it brings a little bit of joy and happiness to the ship. One thing that we've been accused of, I'm not afraid of responding to it, is that we're actually helping smugglers, or we are in fact smugglers ourselves, which is not true at all. We're there to save lives, pluck people out of the sea and take people from unseaworthy craft. We have been accused by 1 or 2 in the media, particularly in America, of fueling this operation and enabling it. But we say no. We say this will continue. This happened before we were down there, and it will happen after we leave. And if we weren't there, there'd be far greater amount of people dying at sea. We can't sit by and watch as people drown at sea. So for us, it's pretty straightforward. And actually, the onus is on Europe to provide safe and legal alternatives for people to reach Europe, so that they don't have to risk this pointless, unnecessary, and dangerous journey. It's not only women and children who are vulnerable, that's true. We get a lot of stuff online, it's predominantly online on MSFC, which is our big Twitter account internationally. Everybody kind of gives us a lot of stick because for some reason they can't deal with men coming across. They say, oh, there's fit young men coming across, and we say, well, they deserve to be rescued too. We're not going to leave them drown at sea simply because they're male and they're young males. So it's not only women and children who are vulnerable too. A lot of men have faced all sorts of things that put them in a very vulnerable situation. Europe is far from the top destination from the world's refugees and other migrants. Something like 2 million people crossed to Europe last year. 65 million people are displaced worldwide. Not a huge amount of people have actually come to Europe, but for some reason, because people are coming here, we deem this to be a crisis. It's not a refugee crisis, it's not a migrant crisis, It's a crisis of leadership, actually, and a crisis of Europe's response to this challenge. Refugees and migrants endure horrific violence and abuse in Libya. We know about that. I talked a little bit about that. As I said, 52% of the people we met have been in detention. 82% of the people have experienced or witnessed extreme violence. This gentleman here was beaten on his back in Libya with a whip, and that's our Dr. Erna treating him. You can see his laceration marks around here. But we also know that we aren't providing the solution to this crisis. Us being down there in the boats is not the solution to this. We know that it's a stopgap, it's temporary, and it's an emergency response to an emergency situation, but we know that it's not a solution. But we also know that preventing people from leaving Libya is not a solution either because of the ill treatment, physical, sexual, financial and psychological abuse people are enduring over there. So to simply shut down the borders and to send people back to Libya would be a completely wrong-footed response as well. But we also know that our search and rescue is not the solution to this crisis. It's going to need something at the very highest levels of the political establishment to change this in any way, shape or form. So that's top 10 things we learned about the refugee crisis in the Central Mediterranean this year. So I think I'll wrap it up there, but I'm going to open the floor to questions, and I'd be delighted to answer any of your questions about any of the issues, my time at sea or any of the issues surrounding it, or anything at all for that matter. So please do fire away, and I'll do my best to answer. Okay, there's two people with their hands up. You had your hand up first, and then we'll come to you.
How do you communicate with all these people because they come from various countries?
Yeah, so we have cultural mediators on board. So when I was on board, Amani, was our cultural mediator. It's his job to, first of all, when we go out to these vessels, to speak Arabic, French, Kiswahili, or the Eritrean and Somali language, which I can't remember the name of right now. He speaks all of those languages. He tells everybody to relax, chill out, we're going to rescue everybody. And he just very quickly has to decide, hold on, where are these people from? Who speaks French, who speaks English, who speaks Arabic? And he'll talk in all of these languages to the various people who are on board the ship. And then when people are taken on board the ship, it's his job again to walk around the ship and talk to everybody on the ship who we've rescued, and tell them what's going to happen next. Because people want to know, okay, we're rescued, we're on the ship, but what awaits us in the future? So it's his role to communicate with everybody, to keep everybody happy and relaxed and chilled out. So yeah, you had a question.
Two questions really. First of all, I'm just wondering, how are the missions funded? Is it through charity donations or is it through government donations or what? Because is it going to be feasible to be able to keep running them if they're
good point. And all of our money comes from internationally. We're up to 98% of our money comes from individual donors. So it's all funded by people. It's all funded by people like you guys and everyone else around the world. We used to take small amounts of money from institutions, governments, etc. But we've started to really not take that anymore. We've always been, as MSF, very, very, very tricky when it comes to accepting money. We won't take money from anybody, particularly the arms industry, governments who are involved with wars, or anybody else who's complicit. And in fact, this year, to give it an Irish angle, we rejected 1.7 million from the Irish government as a principal decision because they signed the EU-Turkey deal, which trapped Syrian refugees in transit in Greece. So we've actually, and for a charity organisation, others can think this is cutting off your nose to spite your face and shooting yourself in the foot, but for us it was a principal decision, so we handed back the 1.7 million. So that means we'll have to dig into our reserves and increase fundraising capacity.
Philanthropy and charity.
Yeah, by doing what we do, which is, the way it works in Ireland is we have people sign up with direct debits, they can donate online, or they can send in a mandate. We have a Without Borders insert that goes into all the national newspapers throughout the year, so people can sign up that way. But yeah, we get our money from individual donors, and part of this whole thing was, as MSF internationally, we rejected all of Europe's money as well, not just the Irish government, but all EU funding, all European money, because of the EU-Turkey deal. So we had to send back a good few million to make a point that what you've done with the EU-Turkey deal is not right. It's not
That's a
principled.
bit ahead. Was that did that get media attention?
It got a bit alright. I mean, we did News at One, and we did the Irish Times, we did RTE, so we did a bit of media in Ireland. And internationally, it got the Wall Street Journal, it got European press, so it created a little bit of a splash. But sometimes we think that we're going to have more impact than we do. But at the end of the day, we're far more independent now without European money. So you can understand. So as MSF, we hold independence really close to our hearts, so that we can get to where we need to go. So say in a war zone, if you want to get into a war zone, and there's two sides fighting each other, if they perceive you to be aligned with one side or the other, you're not going to get access to the people. So part of that is financial independence. And related to this crisis, if Europe isn't funding your rescues operations in Europe's soil, then they can't dictate anything to you, so you can do what you want and what you need to do. So it's less shackles and less strings for us to have no EU money as well. But it was a big decision, and it wasn't an easy decision to make. Does anyone else have any questions?
Do you take or do you have any volunteers?
Yeah, we do. So at the time being, we have 25 Irish people around the world right now. Probably a little bit over 25. Mainly medical people, so doctors, nurses, but also logisticians and people like that as well. So we're always recruiting. We've people all over the world actually. A lot in West Africa, a lot in Middle East, South America, everywhere. But yeah, we do. Absolutely do take people on board. And if you're interested in that, just have a look at msf.ie and look at the HR section. Absolutely. Yourself.
I don't have to answer if you don't want, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like the personal effect it must have on volunteers, the doctors, and their
Yeah.
families must be terrified. And
Yeah, it does have an effect.
these things.
It does have an effect. And I mean, we have this unit, the psychosocial unit, support unit in Amsterdam. And their job is to talk to field staff when they could get back, if they've been through traumatic incidents, and to help them along the way. But yeah, no, it's a big issue for us internationally. There's a lot of stress, a lot of burnout, and a lot of people have witnessed some terrible things. So no, it's real, all right. Yeah, it's real.
So I think, guys, we have come to the end. As I know you have to get somewhere else, and there's a class coming in. But I think the pictures and what you spoke on, Donal, it really is. I think it's something that we need to keep in touch with. Like, none of us are medics here, but I think what you said is keep informed, keep reading, maybe keep online protests going, because we have to do what we can do. It's not about saying, oh, there's nothing we can do. We all can do something. And thank you for sharing that, because it's wonderful to get someone that was there, to get the detail, the stories. These are the things we'll remember. So thank you for being here to listen, but try and go away and do something about informing yourself. And thank you very much, Donal.
No worries. Thank you.